one of the great things a lot of CI practitioners, I think particularly when have taken sort of a leadership position, right, is they recognize the people, process, and systems and tools with a very clear leadership layer over it. And so recognizing, right, as we move into Gen AI or really any of the technologies I see coming down the pipeline, all those elements are still necessary.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Steve Remsen to the show. Now, as you'll hear, Steve's got a really strong and deep background in continuous improvement. He spent many years working at Intel. And so we actually spent quite a bit of time talking about his time there and sort of their program and the evolution of what was going on there and how they evolved that program. And then we really kind of then transitioned into just talking about continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma programs at different types of companies and, why some of them, sort of stick and why some of them don't and what we can be doing and, even our motivations as we're going about this type of work really play an important role. So just a pretty wide-ranging conversation and I really enjoyed it. So show notes can be found over at gembapodcast.com. This is episode 622. Again, gembapodcast.com and look for episode 622. Okay, enough from me. Let's get to the show. Steve, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hey, good. Great to be here, Ron.
What people don't know, they never really get to see the behind the scenes stuff, but Steve and I have had technology gremlins all after us here trying to make this episode not happen. But man, we've persevered and here we are.
Right. CIing the tools as we go.
Love it. All right. Well, hey, where are you calling in from, Steve?
I'm in the Portland, Oregon area.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm excited for today's episode. And as you know, I know you've listened to the show. We like to begin all of our episodes with our guests sharing a quote. So what do you got?
Yeah. So I was trying to pick something, we hear a lot of Deming and Drucker, right? And it makes sense in our field. And I tried to pick something esoteric, but kind of when I thought about what we're talking today, I just couldn't resist George Bach. So I'm sure it's been used before, but, all mottos are wrong, but some are useful, right? And I think this one really resonates with me. I have, before I discovered Lean, Six Sigma, like the whole toolbox of CI, I was a scientist, right? And so that's sort of, coming into business, right? And so how do we sort of, balance utility versus absolute correctness? And, I have a real sort of systems thinker. I think that's one we'll unpack. But, how do we sort of balance that together? It goes through my brain a lot, right? So I think that's a really beautiful quote that really sort of, I think a lot of CI leaders have to learn how to balance, right, correctly, particularly if you're an engineer or a scientist, stepping into that role. You can't build elegant models all the time.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, hey, speaking of your background, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us maybe how you got involved in all this continuous improvement stuff.
Yeah, right on. So I kind of, led into this a little bit. I have a PhD in physics, material science. So
you're like crazy smart, right? Like,
I'm good at faking it. I really, when I go back and look at the beginning of my career 20 years ago, I thought I was going to be like a corporate scientist, right? And I did a lot of sort of work on energy materials, that sort of thing. And I got recruited to go work at Intel. I had some similar experimental background and got to work in their TD fabs. And even in that, moving from scientist to engineer was a bit of a pivot for me, right? Because most of the folks I was working with had that sort of engineering background versus the scientific. But I was experimentalist, so it wasn't too far of a jump. But, I got started and then I met a wonderful mentor who was running the Lean Six Sigma program at Intel at the time. Her name's Shar Stocker. She's since retired. And just really sort of fell in love with this idea of continuous improvement. I think it was a really natural bridge for me to kind of get more into engineering. And I think it really stuck. I think in business, right, a lot of times it's inspiration, hard work, but then the luck of timing certainly helps sometimes too, right? Sure. And so at the time, the technology development fabs at Intel were moving a little bit more towards having to actually do production and almost looking a little bit more like high volume manufacturing. And so some of my very early successes of applying Lean Six Sigma, right, and going through the certification belt program there was, how do we pull some of this goodness and more to a technology development space? And so I did that. I was in manufacturing 5 years to the day. Then I transitioned with actually another mentor within that program who was starting an internal management consulting business at Intel. And so it started with a very small team of like 5 of us saying, hey, we're going to figure out how to do internal consulting, and kept the Lean Six Sigma program going. It actually lost its charter as just being like a training organization. It had to sort of really start adding value within the organization. And so I basically went from being an engineer to being an enterprise-wide business consultant, quickly picked up like change and kind of the people side and the more analytical side, digging more into sort of like the machine learning and then later sort of more AI, particularly Gen AI more recently. But yeah, did that for a couple of years, then basically took over the program and really sort of figured out on a very interesting time, right, where a lot of large enterprises were exiting, having their own training, certification, and portfolios, right, within Lean and Six Sigma, right, and relying more on external consultants again, and trade organizations and even universities. And so, really, I think one of the things we'll unpack today is, right, how did I kind of keep that program going for a number of years, sort of reinvent when really a lot of programs were exiting. And then I think sort of to wrap the story up, the company's going under a big change. I exited right this last year, and I think I had sort of the auspicious honor of, I think, closing down the last Fortune 50 full-blown like Lean Six Sigma certification program when I exited. So it feels sort of like there's a big change coming, right? I think, or has come, right? So it's been interesting to kind of see how to get CI to work, right, and where's it going to next.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so you've mentioned that you worked with Intel's program there for what 10 years ago or something like that is what you were saying?
Yeah, like 15. Yeah, and it's running the program for nearly a decade. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm curious to just hear, like, what were you seeing on the ground? And, obviously, were you happy with what you were seeing, or what was your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of look at this from the angle when I sort of, took on the helm and said, hey, should we keep doing this thing, right? I mean, like I said, I was leading an internal consultancy, right? I mentioned we started with a large team. We at our peak, we were at like 60, right, across most major Intel sites. So there was a big question of like, hey, do we really want to keep, this Lean Six Sigma program going? And I think, what really helped at the time, I was actually going back to school and doing my MBA. And, I saw a lot of sort of practitioners, sometimes we say eat our own dog food. In the world of sales, sometimes I prefer to say drink your own champagne. But, it's the tired quote, right? When you have a hammer, you only see nails. And so I really started to start looking at how do we deploy this program, not so much as a CI practitioner, but more of like how do we look at this from portfolio management and governance perspective, right? And can we, my team, we did internal bill back for our services. So, the P&L I ran, we didn't have any money to run it, right? We had to do it all, build back. And so could we get the program to work here? And I think, I did some marketing research. We really kind of approached it from a marketing strategy and even sort of like a user experience strategy. And really sort of think, what do the employees value, right? How do we sort of market this and get them continuously to be excited, about doing certification? And then from the, at the end of the day, what are our business owners, right? What is the value going to the enterprise of the program? And so we really sort of made some big shifts in the program from sort of like mandate to enablement, from sort of like, certification factory to, a capability platform, really sort of switching right from this, push to a pull system, right? And how do we sort of even sort of like move away from like localized heroes to more like enterprise design? And so I'm happy to kind of unpack it, but I mean, it really sort of picked up, right? And over the last 5 years, we were running the program, still really sort of churning out the ROI. It was, over 600 million, right? In the last 5 years I was running the program.
Wow. So you mentioned something about, I get the words right, like you were talking about like sort of like a certification factory towards like what, talk a little bit more about that. I'm curious to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most fascinating things about Lean Six Sigma, right, is, long gone are like the Jack Welch days and, all the, almost every large enterprise and company having their own certification program. I think GE's like New York School of Management upstate, finally closed down, but you still see it on recs all the time, right? I have, young folks, right, that are coming into the marketplace, right after school, they're still looking to get Lean Six Sigma certified. So the value and the customer demand is still there. But, when I ran the program, I had a very sort of very light touch, right? I was very careful with governance, but one of the things I really sort of was a stickler about is, hey, we're going to be practitioners, and we're going to figure out, if this tool is right for what you're trying to tackle in your role, right? And if you're going to do a certification, we're going to find that sort of sweet spot on how do we add, finance approved business value to what you're trying to do, right? And not just, exercise the tool for the tool's sake. And was also very open to, I'm very tool agnostic, right? So if we can layer in, ProSci or a Cotter change people piece, or does it make more sense to look at, a long time we did like process mining technologies, right? So is there a people or a tech or even another methodology, right? Do we want to pull in some like theory of constraints, or, we're focusing more on lean, that sort of thing, right? So being adaptable as well.
So did you talk about like changes then that you decided to make, once you've noticed things weren't going the way they like, what did you do?
Yeah. So I think some of the big ones in terms of, again, sort of had these two perspectives, right? Who are my two internal customers, right? So one is the individuals, right, that are going through this. And so we really sort of developed a healthy marketing program. We looked at, Bain's elements of value, right, for consumers, and, what are the sort of key points, right, people are pulling away from this? Does it make me better at my job? Does it make things easier? Does it save time? Does it save money? Do I get brand recognition from this, right? So positioning all that sort of things, and a lot of sort of like market research, right? Like, okay, if, people are still, looking for certification, where are they getting it from, and what are our competitors doing, right? What are the universities, what are the trade organizations, and what are we adding, right, that was really unique? In our case, it was a lot of one-on-one mentorship, right, with experience, mentors within the enterprise, right? That was added a lot of value. And then at the other day, sort of like looking, right, again, what does the company need, right? What value are they getting out of the program? And then at the end of the day, am I feeding, my folks, right? Are we getting enough bill back from this? What is our billable model look like to deploy this in a way that it's at least breaking even? And I think in terms of, I thought the interesting things too, is we really sort of saw this as we really sort of studied what people are looking for and had to add value in the enterprise. There were sort of these two sides, right? There was like, hey, there's a lot of, really great tools that are becoming available to folks, right? So doing like, predictive analytics, machine learning, both supervised, unsupervised. There's a lot of stuff on like the tools and statistical side.
Yeah.
But then on the other side too, there was a lot of sort of people stuff, right? Like how do we actually, I really early in my career, I got very fascinated with change management and leadership, because I would see brilliant people with great ideas. And initially I was really confused on why some things would stick and why other things would really fall flat, right? And it really had to do with the people systems, right? And so we did, ProSci, AdCar, Cotter 8 steps, all these sort of things. But at the end of the day, kind of bringing back, what I mentioned earlier, it's really sort of the systems thinking, right? How do we pull all these tools together and effectively coach people in their business, environment, which is another, element in the mix? How do you get all these things to come together to really work, right? And this goes back, right? Some of those models were useful and some weren't, right? So how do you get the right mix of things to really sort of add value, right, to the person in their role?
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like even just in the certification world, obviously we offer certifications here at Gemba Academy. And I remember in the very beginning, like one of my passions was that, there's some, unfortunately, I'm not going to disparage any of our competitors, but there's some get rich quick things out there, right? Like just go up and pay some money and you blink and you've got a green belt or a black belt or whatever it might be,
Yeah, I used to tell folks that. We would always get those folks. It's like, hey, I want a black belt tomorrow. I'm like, cool. I know someplace you can pay $10, take 5 classes and get it, right? But that's not what we do here.
Yeah, and same, I was like, well, maybe we'll lose business. I don't know, but I couldn't sleep at night, being a certification factory or a mill or whatever you want to call it, but unfortunately in our world there's a lot of it, and sometimes it can give it a bad name. Like the methodology itself is not good or bad. It just it's a methodology, right? But you can deploy it poorly and have the wrong intentions. And it even seems interesting on the other side of it, the person going through, we'll get all kinds. Some people like, they literally want a line on their resume because they might be able to make more money if they say they're a black belt or whatever it might be.
Right,
and you got a lot of people who just genuinely want to learn and be better at their jobs and all that. And so, yeah, it's interesting, just human behavior and motivations and, all these messy things that make the human person
I know
so
how you run it.
fascinating.
I always try to convince people, right, that they're trying to build a portfolio, right? And if they ever interviewed with like a true CI practitioner, they'll catch on pretty quick if they just, took an online class or they actually delivered business value with the methodology, right? And so I used to joke around with my team, like, my nightmare scenario is we grant someone a green belt, a black belt, and they go interview someone else and they're like, what's DOE, right? Or what's SPC or, whatever, right? Or so so we were pretty, make sure you know the tools and the disciplines, but then also have the flexibility on how to approach them. It was interesting because we, the other side of my business, right, was being internal, enterprise-wide consultants, and that we were all black belts, master black belts. And, they very actually rarely did sort of like full-blown, like end-to-end DMAIC projects, right? And I'm sure your, certification suite is very similar where the tools interact and you get a lot of value if you use all them together. But we really saw like a lot of like piecemeal, right? Like I'm going to use a process map with a SIPOC, but just stop there, right? That's where we need to, that's shorter, but it, meets the needs of what needs to get done. And certainly we can layer on more later. But so that was always interesting to see. It was sort of like the, I can't remember the name of it, right? You learn like a martial arts discipline, but once you become a master, you start mixing them.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, obviously, you've been in some big companies and big organizations, and obviously a huge company. Like what did you learn about like how to sort of make things stick across such a large organization? Because obviously a lot of moving pieces and a lot of personalities, a lot of different motivations and abilities.
Well, I think, and sort of large, complex, or sometimes not even large, just complex business environments, right? There's a lot of stovepipes. Like you said, there's personalities, there's business units that have different objectives. And so I think one of the sort of the mental models, right, going back to George, I sort of shifted, was thinking more of this as sort of like portfolio versus project mindset, right? How do we sort of get this whole thing deployed? And so, you have to rely on sort of your OpEx, background, right? You have to think about operating rhythms, right? I know that one of the newer keywords I'm seeing a lot is like rhythm of business, which I really like, right? How do we sort of, manage governance, prioritization, trade-offs, and at the end of the day, sort of like, leadership behavior, just not practitioner skill, right? So, how do you sort of lead a program? And I think just sort of engagement was really important. Like kind of going back to those stovepipes, right? A lot of times we would find, I don't know, like a community of practice and shared services, FIDADs, or in legal, or, there's a pocket of, etch engineers and manufacturing, like we're starting our own Lean Six Sigma program, or we're starting our own CI program. And, it's interesting, right? I saw, I interacted with a lot of other folks that were running their own programs also at the enterprise level. And, sometimes the, attitude was like, hey, we're just going to pull you into the fold. You got to like get on board with our governance. And our approach, I think my approach that worked much better would be like, that's awesome. You guys are doing this. How can we help, right? Where can we check your boxes? And I might have, just a few. There was one of our great partnerships is we were like one of the three legs on the stool for this program that was also doing like advanced business analytics and then like people systems, right? And then, our program was their third thing. But we worked a lot with them on like, hey, we don't really like this part of your training, or this part of our training is pretty much covered what you're doing here. Can we just, skip out of it so our folks aren't wearing time? So that's sort of like, how do you systems integrate your program versus just sort of jamming it through? I think really made a big difference, right? Is both sort of like as a key enabler, but there's always something to be said about like psychological safety, right? Like, when word gets out, right? Are you easy to work with or are you not? Right. And so you want to be a go-to, right? People, hey, I heard you help stand up this program. Can you help us? Right. That's really where you start scaling out effectively.
Yeah. So I'm curious to hear. I mean, now that you've moved away from Intel, what do you what's next for you? And then maybe part two of that question is like, from all of your experience and what you see out there in the big world, like what do you think organizations are struggling with the most, maybe as it pertains to continuous improvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. So I kind of mentioned earlier, right? We may, I believe so, close down one of the last, big LSS certification services, internal. But I think CI is still really alive. I mean, I think it's been very interesting, especially in tech, to sort of see this AI, Gen AI piece come through. And I've seen it a lot before, at sort of a tech company with sort of digital enablement and automation, and it gets very tool focused, right? And I think one of the great things a lot of CI practitioners, I think particularly when they're have taken sort of a leadership position, right, is they recognize the people, process, and systems and tools with a very clear leadership layer over it. And so recognizing, right, as we move into Gen AI or really any of the technologies I see coming down the pipeline, all those elements are still necessary, right? And so I think Lean Six Sigma is going to be another tool in the box, right? I think that's where it belongs. I don't know if it's going to be the core enabler, right, where it's been. I think other buzzwords will come and go. But at the end of the day, right, how do we get those three things working together, right? And I've been doing some advisory and consulting work as sort of I look for my next opportunity. Maybe I'll keep doing that because that's been fun. But, really, how do you sort of build? Or I think one of the things I did that was quite challenging is how do you sort of refresh an enterprise CI program and really get it sort of, design the systems that actually work at scale. What's the right model? And maybe it's not the most elegant one, right? But what really sort of sticks and add business value, right? It helps you understand the system. It helps you make hypotheses, allows you, basically guides you, right, to make better business decisions. And I think, I mentioned sort of avoiding the tool worship, right, is really important here, or being sort of dogmatic, right, about any sort of one methodology. And I think this is where I've tend to added a lot of value, right? I have this sort of tech and business background. How do we integrate all that really to get results that stick, right, at the end of the day?
What are you mentioned AI several times now in our conversation. Like, what is your take on just the state of AI in the world? ChatGPT and
I've always been like a early adopter of AI. Actually, a colleague, hopefully we'll get out here, but we written a paper and we talked about it. One of the last things I did at Intel, we actually ran the first Gen AI classes on how to. First it was like ChatGPT, and then we had an internal tool and the other stuff that started rolling out after that, like 3.5 moment, right, for ChatGPT. But one of the most interesting things we found, right, is people had access to a lot of tools. Like OpenAI was actually great about like getting out training and content, but at the end of the day, it's a people story, right? Like we started hosting workshops and people showed up. First it was like, what am I allowed to do and what am I not allowed to do? But then it came more of like, hey, we had some like great stories of like people like laughing or even crying at the tool. Someone said my colleague who helped launch the tool, in the early days when it wasn't great, she was using it for parenting advice too, and it told her, hey, as a mom, you're supposed to have all the answers, right? And it's you get these sort of things that. So I think people are sort of brilliantly imperfect, and these sort of tools that come out, they augment a lot of our weaknesses, but then they have their own, right? So how do we sort of work on these sort of partnerships with technology, I think is really important. And I know we talked a lot about, I think about, how this could certainly be a singular moment with Gen AI. There's a lot of new parts of the technology, but some of this feels like a story repeating itself again. We've had a lot of sort of technologies that, I think the big focus right now is on productivity, right? And I see some massive, opportunities there, but we're still, I think, in the hype cycle, right? We're going to have to bring people along for the story, and they're going to play a big part on how AI effectively gets integrated into enterprises, right? I still don't think we're seeing quite all the value there.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there other platforms that you experiment with? I mean, obviously, ChatGPT seems to be the most.
Oh yeah, no. There's I used to use a lot. There's a great tool called Poe that lets you like basically play with all the different models like in a single thing. But no, I kind of jump back and forth, and they have different personalities, and it's sort of fun. Or I've gotten into that sort of like custom GPT space, right? How do I design something that's more for mine? One of the things my team did before we left Intel too is we worked on this enterprise tool called the AI Assistant Builder that was basically like a locally run instance that you preloaded and like, hey, I'm a HR professional or I'm an engineer, and then it's sort of used RAG to how do we get a more focused model, or GPT based on what you do, right?
Yeah.
And kind of helped with some of the hallucinations and some of the other pieces with it. But again, I think it's a tool, a powerful one, but one that needs to get integrated with people and process to really be effective.
For sure. Good stuff. Well, hey, Steve, man, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking time to come on. I don't know, do you have any sort of like final words of wisdom or anything that you want to leave with the folks?
Yeah, it was really great talking. Like I said, I'm exploring, right? I really get most energized by helping organizations design systems that actually, hold up to scale, right? And how do we navigate these complex systems? And again, build the right model, and if it's not the right model, we go on to the next model, right? What really adds value. But no, it's been a lot of fun, Ron. It's I've listened for a while, so it's fun to finally chat with you. Awesome. And if people wanted to connect with you, Steve, what's the best way? Right now it's on LinkedIn, right? So, sometimes I get an O in my name. The last name is Remsen. But otherwise, that's the best way to just connect with me. And I'm pretty active on the platforms. You can hear my thoughts on tech and business. Nice. There, so. Yeah, we'll get it linked up here in the show notes. Everybody go connect with Steve over there on LinkedIn. So, okay. All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on. Hey, thanks, Ron. Have a great day. All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening. Whether you've been on the continuous improvement journey for many years, or perhaps you're just getting started, Gemba Academy is here to support you. And while we're best known for our more than 1,500 Lean and Six Sigma teaching and virtual tour videos, we also have a team of experienced Lean and Six Sigma practitioners available for one-on-one coaching, as well as a variety of Lean and Six Sigma certification options. To learn more and to schedule a demo, head on over to GembaAcademy.com.